Maruo Suehiro's Warau Kyuuketsuki, also known as the Grinning Vampire or Laughing Vampire, is my favorite of his. It does everything that I love about his art. Is it perfect? No. And like most ero-guro, there are extremes throughout. The extremely bad with the good. The death and violence with the love. The corrupt society with these vampires cleaning it up. This is not just a typical, gory, over-sexualized vampire tale. Despite how it seems, there are plenty of messages, and, well, the art is just fascinating and bizarrely beautiful. Spoilers ahead. There's a major focus on children characters, two of them eventually becoming vampires, but they stand out from the rest of the children in this story, because really they're all just a bunch of awful people, and that's kind of the point here. Every character is pretty much awful in one way or another, except for these two kids here, as well as this one here. But they are the ones we like the most. Now, they're not innocent, they're vampires of course, but looking at the bigger picture, they're doing more good than bad. So the manga starts off with the backstory of this head vampire, this old woman named Rakuda. Decades in the past, the world was devastated and seemingly a dystopian landscape where anarchy reigned. Those who didn't fit the mold of the majority were sentenced to death. And, well, Rakuda, to them, resembled an Onibaba, or demon woman, and killed her, or so they thought. The earth itself rejected her, so she became a monster, a vampire, and wandered the earth. Fast forward into the more modern times, she disguised herself as a fortune teller for the sole purpose of finding the right companion, and the student named Konosuke just happens to be the right one. So she forces him into her clan with her vampiric blood. Now, it's always interesting to see what kind of cliches and tropes a vampire story will embrace, but I do have to say the differences here are a nice change. These vampires don't have fangs, so they rely on sharp weapons to puncture their victims in order to drink their blood. They are also telepathically linked to their so-called headmaster. The light bothers them, but crosses are not effective. Now, the big twist is that being a vampire will actually rapidly age you, rather than keeping you the same age or slowing the aging process. So at first, characters believe to be the age they turned forever, until it's explained later on. As Konosuke attempts to adjust to his changing body, we are introduced to the character of a young female named Luna, and she is obviously not like her peers. They all use their sexuality in order to gain money from older men. Luna, however, was sexually assaulted as a child and now harbors a great amount of hatred for anything sexual. Even the idea of her sister having a baby triggers her. These two, like I said before, are nothing like the other children, which is made more evident when the fourth character is introduced. Soto, a demented, deranged student who kills cats and lights fires, obsesses over vampires, though in fact is not a vampire, and keeps track of all his crimes in this journal here, the Laughing Vampire. John Wayne Gacy enters the scene. Okay, actually his name is apparently Khan. Unfortunately, he assaults Luna, who then becomes even more disassociated. So Konosuke kills some more people, drinks their bloods, adjusts to the vampire life. Luna runs into Soto, and together they hear commotion in this apartment building. So we cut to Konosuke crashing a drug-filled orgy, kills all of them rather violently, but eventually leaves the room as the two others enter. Soto can't control his perverted urges and kills Luna, or so he thought. Konosuke sees Luna dying, but gives her his blood, and then we are greeted to this rather beautiful image. And those are the extremes I'm talking about. We went from a scene like this to this in a mere few pages. As Soto watches the news, he realizes that all the kids were accounted for except for Luna's body, so the idea of real vampires starts to haunt him. Not only that, his mother finds his diary, so he's forced to run away from home. The transformation of Luna into a vampire and the relationship with Konosuke, these are all very poetically illustrated. They aren't saints, of course, but in a world where they are both rejected, they find solace in each other. So they begin to kill together. But it isn't all bad killings, really. It seems as though those that get killed have it coming to them. The John Wayne Gacy rapist is killed off, and this group of Nazi punks too. Another character is introduced, Makoto, looking for his missing sister, and students tease him about that. Again, we're dealing with a bunch of assholes. His mother is an odd one, with a rather dark secret, but I won't spoil much more. Konosuke and Luna crash a party, and they meet another group of vampires, and the rest of the manga is pretty much just a battle between these two different clans. It's a dark story with glimmers of light and hope. It has disturbing moments. It is a horror manga about vampires, so a lot of it is excusable. And trust me, you won't get much more accessible than this. When it comes to Maruo, it's a great starting point for anyone getting into his work or the genre. At the core of it all, we have this corrupt society without sense and order. Rakuta's vampires here are the only ones doing any sort of saving, and the vampires representing a sense of purity, perhaps maturity, which is pretty ironic. But keep in mind, these are just teenagers, so even though they have these strange new powers, they deal with their emotions, their angst, confusion, and in their mind, they believe to be teenagers forever. A blessing in some ways, but also a curse. I like the character of Konosuke. He has a lot of great quotes, and I love the whole anti-hero aesthetic. Luna as a troubled character is very relatable in some ways, how she doesn't fit in with the rest of her classmates. But she never blends into those societal norms, but stays defiant, despite all the crap she goes through. Is this a love story? Well, we can see the scenes between Luna and Konosuke differ than a lot of the other lustful scenes we see throughout. They're depicted very beautifully. But yeah, that's what it's all about here. It's Maruo's art that really stands out. The story is okay, but just look at some of these images. We could see into a character's dreams. They're very disturbing moments. And we all know dreams can be totally incomprehensible, but I think Maruo did a great job at capturing that sheer absurdity of our dreams. I understand images being metaphors, but the bug obsession, I don't know if anyone out there can explain that one to me. There's a lot of owl and bird imagery, maybe a connection to time and wisdom, or maybe Maruo just really likes birds. I love a lot of the references here too, the Elephant Man, all the classic horror like Dracula and the Invisible Man, and is this a reference to the Phantom of Paradise? The fighting is interesting as well. Usually in movies, vampires are just shown kind of jumping at each other. But with this one, they rely more on weapons, and they kind of glide like they're floating. Aside from this odd commercial, there has never been any sort of adaptation of this manga. In many ways, I'm glad. I don't think anything could really do this art justice. But I do think an anime like the upcoming Uzumaki would be rather amazing. But you couldn't censor anything. Live action, on the other hand, let's try to stay away from that. I think we've learned from the past. There are some cool shirts floating on the internet out there, but aside from that, there isn't much about this manga. Again, I want to say it's not perfect, and the story could be rather forgettable, but it's a great starting point for any new Maruo fan, and it isn't very long, and it's rather tame in comparison to some of his other stuff.